I'm going to say that we should begin. It's almost 10 after, and I appreciate you all being here. What I'd like to do is take a few minutes to introduce myself. And as other people come in, they will, then I'll get into more of the heart of what the program is. I have been practicing yoga since my late teens, early 20s. Yoga philosophy has always really fascinated me. And over the last few years, last 10 years in particular, my focus has been on yoga as lifestyle medicine. And my motto is that I practice as if my life depends upon it, because it does. And when I was thinking about today's program, what I really wanted to do was talk about how over the course of a lifetime, we have experiences that make us feel expansive and exuberant and confident and vital. And they're experiences that make us feel quite small. And it's those experiences of feeling small, we can call it disappointments or distractions. We can call it transitions or major changes in our lives. But there are so many experiences that require us to really take a giant step back and take a look at our lives. And I know that you have had these experiences. No one gets to be our tender ages without having had some substantial transitions and challenges in our lives. So the subject of emotional self-regulation is extremely important to me. What's most important is the fact that we can name it. I've been teaching this for many years, breath work, pranayama, breathing exercises that help people literally regulate their nervous system. What happens between yoga postures, breathing exercises, and meditation is that our physiology changes. Our bodies become softer and more relaxed, which is a much better state of mind for problem solving and making the important changes that we need to make. So in today's practice, there are going to be intellectual exercises, there are going to be physical exercises, we're going to have some breakout rooms. And if we have the great good fortune of having this intimate a group, then I think we may just, rather than doing a breakout session, if it's comfortable with you, then the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the 9 of us will have a conversation about emotional self-regulation. The point I wanted to make before is that after teaching this for so many years, I was teaching a group the other day, and people were talking about how much their lives had changed over the course of time using these practices and seeing themselves through the yogic lens. And when I said, well, that's emotional self-regulation, everyone sat back and said, that's what that is? It was as if no one ever sort of gave them the heading or the title or the goal specifically, and that people were slowly moving into this self-awareness of feeling calmer, having more perspective, feeling that they had a little bit or a lot more distance on what was happening to themselves and to other people. They felt calmer. They were more ready to sit with their sadness or depression without having to run away from it. It was easier for them to say, this is a quiet time for me. I need to have practices that help me feel spacious, help me soften into a deeper understanding. But the idea of emotional self-regulation had not occurred to them. So that is where yoga becomes a lifestyle medicine. And my hope is that in today's program, you'll be able to taste some things that you've probably done before, compare them to how you've had that experience on the yoga mat in your own personal practices, consider how you've taught it. All of these things interest me very much. And it's interesting, Beth, with your work being a physical therapist, a great deal of what I do is with physical therapists. I find that there's a movement within your profession to work more with mind-body, to help people see themselves differently, even though it's a clinical setting in physical therapy. The yogic piece of it is very powerful. So I'm particularly happy that you bring your combined capacity here today. It'll be very interesting with what you might have to add. And I see Giselle is here. Giselle, feel free to maintain your closed video if you wish, or let us know where you're from and how you are. I want to thank you for being here today as we get started. One of the things that I thought might be fun to do just at the get-go was talk about how emotional self-regulation fits into the 4 pillars, because this is what we carry into the community, or this is what we carry into our own awareness. And it was really fun to play with this. So I'm going to read to you, and I would like for you to feel free to make notes, because I'm going to ask you towards the end how you feel that what you've done today applies to your understanding and appreciation of the 4 pillars. So here it goes. If the first pillar is diet and supplementation, my question to you is obvious. What is your emotional diet? With whom do you spend your time? What do you watch and read? When and why? What is happening in your life? What changes or transitions are introducing new flavors and experiences, and are they easy or hard to digest? Is the information you are acquiring or discoveries you are making easy or difficult to digest? So we can think of the nutritional value of our relationships with ourselves and other people, with changes and transitions in our lives and in the lives of people we care for, in terms of our own capacity to digest that experience or that information. Second pillar is stress management. And this is why we're having today's program, which is to acknowledge that stressors exist, but that all of the research suggests that chronic stress contributes to chronic inflammation. And one of the research studies that I'm going to point out to you to pick up is on dementia prevention in clinical practice. And one of the points they make when they talk about chronic stress, depression or anxiety, this is what they recommend: mindfulness training, meditation, medication, cognitive behavioral therapy, exercise, counseling, and people may also benefit from more vacation, which I thought was really a fascinating thing to see on this clinical practice research document. So the idea is that on a day like today, we remind ourselves of how we can throughout every day. And I'd like you to do it now with me. Just stretch your arms out, lift your heart towards the sky, float the base of your skull back, and take an easy series of breaths. Easy breathing in. Exhale, ha, with a sigh, or with a hum, or om with an om. And just let yourself open up. We don't want a program filled with interesting information to make us feel that we're listening and we're focused. That's really important, but it can make us feel small. So let yourself physically feel more open, and that automatically has a physiological impact. And that's what we need to know, that self-regulation isn't just how we think, it's how we move in a way that creates more of a sense of expansion. Super important. And I think each of you know exactly what I mean. So Giselle, it's so nice to see you. Thank you for being here. So those are the first 2 pillars. Stress management today, we're going to combine intellectual pursuit with action, with an attitude of open-mindedness and self-compassion. The third pillar is physical and mental exercise. It's what we're doing. The physical piece of this is movement. Movement is fundamental. And we'll talk about that a little bit when I get to the research piece. And the research piece is tiny. There are 4 articles that I think are really fabulous. I'll send new notes that encapsulate some of what happens in this dialogue today. But I would like you also to bring up anything that you think is relevant throughout the class today on the ideas of physical and mental exercise, because part of mental exercise is learning new skills. It's not just learning new ways to move, but it's learning new ways to think about yourself in relationship to what's happening inside of you and in the world around you. So the first mental exercise that I would point to is the one that talks about how important your personal experience is for you. And if you are in relationship with me, for you to be able to say, acknowledge, and we're together, well, Linda, that is your personal experience. You may have a personal experience of me, but part of this program today is to fully appreciate your experience, not your partner's experience, not a family member's experience, not a friend's experience, not a stranger's experience, although we do empathize and sympathize with people. But today is really about your experience of yourself with a compassionate and open heart. And the 4th piece, the spiritual fitness piece, is complicated because some of us have a relationship with God and the divine and faith in something far greater than us that reinforces our faith in ourselves. This is really important. For me, the proof of spiritual fitness is the faith I have in myself on a continuum of everything that was, is, and will ever be. And that piece of it opens me up to all that has ever been great and good, all that is great and good and ever will be. So that's the 4 pillars as I look at it in terms of our discussion of emotional self-regulation. Does anyone have any questions or comments before I go on? Okay. So here we are. What I'd like to do now that we've addressed the 4 pillars, which is very important, I'd like you to find a comfortable position because the outline for today promised a meditation to start with. And I'm going to demonstrate different ways to do it, whether you choose to do it this way for yourself or you're teaching it to someone else. In my world, I just prehabbed and am helping someone recover from a lung surgery. And so we spent a lot of time looking for spacious awareness in the space around us and in the space within us. So as you decide how you want to be for this meditation, and it's going to be about maybe a 5 to 8 minute meditation, I'm going to invite you to remind yourself, whether you're a student or teacher or looking for new ideas, that the idea is to set yourself up first in a position that is totally and completely comfortable. So the idea is that we choose Sukham. In yoga, we know that there's Sukham and Dukham. Sukham is the sweetness and Dukham is the difficulty. There's a yoga pose called Sukhasana. There is no yoga pose called Dukhasana. A teacher will never ask you intentionally to choose a difficult or uncomfortable position. So for your very first meditation today, I'm going to demonstrate some options. I can put a support behind my spine so that I can sense this corridor of awareness from the space of my spine up through the crown of my head as fully supported. And I'm going to take my pillows, and I'll do this. I've done this with so many different students in so many different ways. And you prop yourself up And you have a support behind your back and pillows underneath your arms, so that the body is fully supported, my head is supported, and I have a sense of lightness as I begin. So this is one way to invite my entire body into a posture that invites relaxation and a surrender to the moment that is calm and relaxed. The other possibility that you might enjoy would be an inversion, because inversions and supported postures and back bends are all part of emotional self-regulation. So one example of an inversion would be, and I want to show you all of these because a class like this isn't enough just to show you one way, because you yourself and people with whom you work might really appreciate not just variety, but the necessity of being comfortable, let's say, in bed doing this posture. So if I'm stretched out on my sofa, I can elevate my legs. I can let my hands rest on my belly, soften and breathe. So this is one kind of an inversion where my head is below my heart. And another inversion example would be at a wall space. So if we're talking about emotional self-regulation, we want to use as many techniques as possible with variety, so that we can give our bodies an opportunity to co-create this mental state of expanded awareness, so that when difficulties arise, you know what it's like. The brain wants to focus on that problem. Well, you can focus on that problem upside down or stretched out, because that impacts your baroreceptors in your neck, and it will automatically slow down your heart rate and your blood pressure, and it quiets your brain waves. So make your choice, please, whatever that's going to be. If I don't see you, I'm going to assume that you've chosen a wonderful Sukhasana, a very different kind of yoga pose for yourself to start with. You can also do it sitting straight up in a chair. It's perfectly fine. The idea is that you acknowledge that you have been invited into a variety of situations. Your choice. This is your experience. I want to emphasize this. This is your experience of yourself, without criticism or judgment. And you're going to find yourself in that comfortable position. If you can have your head and neck supported, that's great. If not, I would invite you to sit as tall as you can with broad shoulders and a soft belly. If you're lying down, a broad heart. Arms are going to be in a position where they're extended or maybe resting on your lap. And at some moment, you will decide that your body is ready for stillness. And you're going to take a good look around the room before you close your eyes. When our eyes are open and we're looking around, there's an enormous amount of stimulation. And that activates our brains, and our brainwave activity fluctuates at much faster intervals. So just blink your eyes, look around your room, move your head, please. These are all normal activities of your everyday experience with a very active brain. We can measure this. And at some point, you're going to gaze across the room at eye level or up towards the ceiling, and you're going to blink your eyes closed. And you're going to turn your awareness to the beating of your heart or how your body feels in the position you've chosen for yourself. The minute you close your eyes, your brain goes, oh, in a safe place, a safe posture, in a comfortable position where you've exercised your own choice. There is a modicum, a quality of safety. You have made this choice for comfort. Your brain and your body acknowledge this, and you soften, eyes closed. Notice what it feels like on the inside to let your breath slow down just a little bit. So you'll breathe in, maybe pause at the top of that breath, and then out, 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 and pause at the bottom. So we're still inviting the mind to engage. Eyes are closed. Lips are closed, and you're breathing through your nose, which helps with the production of nitric acid, which helps with anti-inflammatory actions physiologically. You want your upper jaw and lower jaw to be slightly separate, and the tongue relaxed on the floor of your mouth like a little blanket. You want to sense your shoulders, your arms, and your hands fully supported, either by your lap, a chair, a pillow, a floor. You're going to notice the belly rise and fall as you breathe in and out. You're going to let the exhalation become longer than the inhalation. So you'll feel yourself settling into this moment. Enjoy the next breath in, in, pause at the top. Exhale more deeply than you inhaled, with a sense of softening, expanding as you breathe in. As if your body is a light capsule for the breath. And when you let that breath go, you feel the body sinking down, as if you feel yourself cradled in this very safe and comfortable position. If at some point you need to shift your position, feel free to do so. And this is how we invite ourselves into contemplative meditative practice, to calm and quiet the physical body first in a pose that's pretty open. Arms should be spread, body soft, head comfortable, breath easy. And now you simply begin to notice the space within you as an infinite space, not so finite, as if the breath itself brings with it a greater sense of space around it. And for the next few moments, I'd like you to practice simply quietly noticing the movement of the vessel as it receives the breath. With closed eyes, the head and body are still. If your mind begins to wander, marvel at that. That's what minds do. So with a smile on your face, aha, that's a thought. Then you turn your awareness back to the breath. And you soften into this place, in this moment, where you can experience all that has ever been great and good, has ever been, is in this moment, and will ever be. And I'm going to be quiet while you use these moments as if this was going to last until you were ready to blink your eyes open. I'm inviting you to soften more into the quietude of the body, of the breath. Sense the simplicity of this. So if you could truly flow with this experience of breath in and through you, through and beyond you. This is just one way. I'm sure it is very familiar to you. Many of you who are here in this moment, perhaps not as familiar to people who may watch this later. Before opening your eyes, notice what it felt like to be invited into a variety of postures that you could play with before you quieted the mind for a few moments in an exercise intended to honor this human form, its busy mind, and its capacity to align with goodness and greatness on a continuum. That which does not change. Before you open your eyes, I want you to notice also, for those of you who are here now, what it feels like to do this in the presence of others who are interested in learning this together. Knowing that you are very much a part of everyone's experience today in a particular way. As we offer this as our cradle of support for one another. Before you open your eyes, take a few more moments to just notice the felt sense, that interoceptive feeling of being invited right back into your own beingness in the middle of a program. Just notice what that felt like for you. And then I'm going to invite you to blink your eyes open and return to a comfortable seat. As you come back to your comfortable seat, let your feet feel firm on the ground beneath you. Extend your arms out to the side, maybe a seated half moon. Going side to side with an open heart and the head held high. And then, Chelsea, if you could move us back to the big room so we can all see each other, that would be great. Thank you. So this is an amazing opportunity to talk with each other. So we're going to try this without the breakout room. What do you think, Chelsea? You know, she's given me a...
I think we should stay where we are, yeah.
Okay, let's do that. Let's do that. So I've just shared with you some of my best practices. And I will tell you the truth, I went to the home of someone, thanks. I went to the home of someone many, many years ago who needed yoga for stress reduction. And the first thing I had this fellow do, he's about 5 years older than I was in my mid 40s maybe. And the first thing I had, this very stressed out human being, I said that the most important thing that I want to teach you before we go any farther is Viparita Karani, an upside down construction. I demonstrated against the wall the way you did. And this man was, comfortable, threw himself up the wall with his arms by his side, lengthened his spine, and we walked through something called Maha Mudra, which I'm going to introduce you to in a few minutes. And I said, I just want you to be there quietly for about 1 minute. Just soften your jaw. And I asked if I could, and I just put my hands on his shoulders, which were like this. And so I just invited him to soften and roll his palms up as if there were globes of goodness and light in his hands. And I talked just a little bit more. And I said, I'm going to be quiet for 5 minutes. And 5 minutes later, I said to him, it's been 5 minutes. And he said, thank you. You can go now. And I said, but we're not finished. And he said, I've just learned everything I need to know. And one of the suggestions that I have heard over the years is that it makes sense to turn ourselves upside down before the world turns things upside down, so that we have a relationship with this idea of things being not the way they normally are, but from a position where we feel safe and calm. So I like this posture because regardless of what's going through your mind, you have more access to brainwave activity that's called alpha. Alpha is very slow. Delta is the slowest. Alpha is next. Closing your eyes and keeping your head still, softening the body and moving into the breath, into your relationship with the breath, induces these alpha rhythms that are so restorative to our central nervous system. So what you just saw are practices that I've done with people in wheelchairs. I've done them with people in so many different environments, just elevating the arms, opening the brachial plexus, opening the side of the body so there's more space for the breath itself to expand within the vessel. Those options, a little bit of support behind the back that lifts the spine, which is so important to get the lift. And the suggestions, the invitations that I gave you in that very brief meditation are some of my best practices. What I'm interested in are yours. I was discussing this with someone the other day, and they said, you want to know their healthy practices, Linda. You don't want to know the practices that might not be so healthy. But who am I to judge what's healthy for you? Because your experience of you is what's important. Is it my interest to try to help you make productive choices that are for your welfare and that will keep you safe? Yes. So if I'm aware that you're doing practices that I might worry about, I might say at some point, can you tell me a little bit more about that? Or how's that working for you? But right now, why don't we just unmute yourself? You can raise your hand if you want to, but I think that I trust you all to listen to one another. What are your most healthy practices? If you could teach us all one thing, what would it be?
I'll go because I have to leave soon to go teach.
Okay, thank you, Jane.
Well, I mean, just the whole breath awareness that you just took us through is also my go-to. And the other one that I use a lot for myself and my students is using all the senses. The five senses meditation, where you're just, what do you hear? What do you taste? What do you smell? And just spending quality time with each sense out in the forefront, and the others more retreated. And that pratyahara practice, for those of us in yoga, that's one of my go-tos.
Thank you. Thank you. So let me just elaborate a little bit more on pratyahara very quickly. I'm going to demonstrate. You're going to do it. If you place your thumbs in your ears, your fingertips over your eyes, over your nose, and breathe through your mouth. Okay. I think you can hear me now. So cannot hear, cannot see, cannot smell. If I'm breathing through my mouth, I'm not tasting. Feeling, the felt sense is about the only one we're left with. So pratyahara comes after the physical asana practice, after the breathing practices have been, you're in the process of mastering them. Pratyahara is when you withdraw your senses from the outside world and turn your awareness inward. So that's perfect, Jane. I could have asked her to do this, but I didn't, because it speaks to the individual's experience in the moment, your experience. So thank you, Jane. I'm glad that you made time to be here today.
I did. I'm going to
five senses.
Camera.
Okay, thank you. Okay, who's next? Okay, Beth, you need to unmute yourself. There you go.
Well, with my patients, I think the most helpful thing that I do, especially the ones that are super busy, perhaps they're, single moms and they work and they don't have a lot of time to just sit, I'll go ahead and put them in Shavasana at the end of their treatment for about 5 minutes. So I'll put like a half bolster under their spine to help them open up. And then I tactily press their shoulders down. I open up their palms and explain, this is the gesture of giving and receiving. If they're comfortable, I'll go ahead and place a towel over their eyes and just allow them to breathe and have that time, because that's such a luxury for a lot of people. So I do that. And also at work a lot with my patients, I explain to them the connection between how oftentimes pain is not just physical, it's often emotional and mental. And, we go through the different layers of being. So lots of education and bringing that awareness, teaching them how to breathe, because a lot of people, just the fact that if they can just breathe, that's huge. When I'm teaching yoga, the way that I like to start my classes is with a block under the chest and one under the head, just to open up and, start with that expansiveness with breath awareness. And then just checking in, how are you feeling physically? How are you feeling emotionally? What's your heart telling you today? How are you feeling mentally? And then circle it back to the physical. Oftentimes, our physical body manifests, or, it changes based on how we're feeling otherwise. So just a lot of awareness.
Thank you. Your emphasis on what are you feeling? How are you feeling? Notice she didn't say, what are you thinking? So the fact that someone else cares about how they feel is such an enormous gift to bring, and also the gift of touch. So this is very important. Thank you so much, Beth. That was beautiful. Thank you. I appreciate that. It was great variety too. Who's next? Lana.
Hi, everyone. So I'd just like to add on to the Pratyahara and add Brahmari breath, the bee buzz there, because I find with my clients that they're very, many of them have sleep issues. And oftentimes the sleep issues are connected to the ruminations of thoughts attached to emotions that they have experienced throughout their years, and a lot of the time going back to childhood and trauma. So I love doing this exercise with them, which is what you just showed, which is closing off the hearing, closing off the sight, closing off the nose, for two reasons. First of all, it's a stress management strategy, but it's also a sleep management strategy. So I add to it through that, the Brahmari black bee buzz is a hum. So I don't know if anybody would like to do it with me. Yes? Okay,
Sure.
Okay, Kirti's got her hand up. So you want to really expand and extend the breath, and especially the exhalation, which is the hum, because you don't have your nose to breathe in, right? So I'm gonna demonstrate it, and then you can do it with me, and you try and really milk out the breath, because once you do that, you're activating the vagus nerve and you're building vagal tone. And when you build the vagal tone, like you're toning a biceps, you're actually getting the whole stress management system to kick in and the sleep management system to kick in. So I'll start it, and you can join me anytime, or just listen, or just close your eyes or whatever, but it's a buzz, like you're a bee, you're humming. So, of course, your nose is not completely closed, because then you wouldn't be able to do anything, but it's partially closed. I didn't mention that. I apologize for that for those of you sitting there holding your breath. So that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you, Lana. That's great. And the discussion about vagus tone, that vibration, the sound itself, the emoting is all part of the deep relaxation of our central nervous system. It's very potent. The hum, the buzz, the vibration. And the other thing that I like about it is that so much of stress is because there's something we cannot get off our chests.
Or
And
out
so
of our
energetically,
voice.
you get stuck.
Yeah.
And so, and it's very potent in so many different ways. So thank you, Lana. Who's next? Okay, Amy.
Wonderful. I love our toolkits. It's wonderful. So one thing that I add to all these lovely tools as well is a guided body scan, with the suggestion that people embody that practice, because it is so deceptively simple, but incredibly potent as a form and means to ground ourselves. And our body's already there. We know the parts. We scrub them every day and dress them every day. So I find this to be really helpful for people, especially people that are incredibly overwhelmed or really anxious. Some of the clients I have, where they're humming with energy that not in a healthy way of help me, you know, and I'm like, okay, let's just start here. All you need to do
Good.
is, you know, map your body. So it's the, you know, the body mapping, you know, rebodying component. And I find that to be incredibly effective in what I call my yoga snack homework assignments with people, because they're like, hey, I can do that anywhere. I'm like, indeed, you can. Standing, seated, I'd opened or closed, but I do encourage them then to soften or close their eyes with, you know, like nature bathing, sensory bathing, and maybe envision a blow of wind along their back, a gentle breeze, you know, to add that once they're comfortable with just the basic of scanning the body. Yeah.
Thank you, Amy. I also love that because it speaks to our relationships with our physical bodies, which
Mhm.
change over time. And it's neutral, and it's appreciative,
Mhm.
and it's honoring.
Mhm.
And in that way, people feel safe about feeling and
Mhm.
noticing. And I feel very strongly when we were promoting this program, I didn't use the term well-being. I used safe being, because
Mhm.
it is this felt sense of being safe. It has to exist somewhere in your life. And finding it within your own awareness, within your own practice, it's an incredible source of healing and self-compassion. So thank you, Amy. That's wonderful. Okay, Myrna, Donna, or Giselle, no pressure. But if you, yeah, Donna, great.
Love all these practices. I just wanted to add two things that I have formed into a habit that I do every day when I first get up. And when I first get out of bed, I press my feet on the floor. I'm still sitting on the bed. And then I press into my feet and release. And I do that enough times that I feel my spine naturally getting taller. I don't have to force it. And suddenly I'm just, ooh, look at that, my leg. Woo! It's like I'm getting lighter. But I do that every day. And then when I go in the bathroom and the water is cold, I turn on the hot water and I hold onto the sink and I walk back and I stretch my back like a, you know, like a downward dog at the sink. And I do that until I feel like the water's getting warmer. And I might step 1 foot forward and stretch and then step the other foot forward. And if that's the only yoga I do every day, it seems to be helping a whole lot. These are physical things. And then there's always the breathing too. But
Yes. And you know, you say it's only the physical, but it really is. The minute you stretch out and open, the entire body says, thank you.
it does.
This is the flow. This is the movement. So movement isn't just doing that. It's the sustained experience of the inner body.
Yeah.
Just open and expanding. I mean,
Yeah.
spreading your wings, whatever you do, that's beautiful. Thank you.
I just have a question about that I'm a little not clear on. The water, which water are we talking about there?
I turn on the hot water. I live in a condo and it takes a little while before the water warms up, but
Is this for your shower we're talking about? Or for
even just to wash my hands in the sink.
Oh, okay.
I'm right there with you, Donna. I live in a very old building and I don't like to waste water, but I gotta have some warmth. Yeah, I knew exactly what you meant.
You gotta give it a little bit of time anyway, so I just figured, okay, I'm gonna stretch out.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you. There's a book called A Morning Cup of Yoga. It's out of print. You can usually find them for $1 on a used book website. It's one of the best books you'll ever own. I think I still have maybe 16 copies of it. I bought so many when I realized they were going out of print, and I buy all the ones I can get. Okay. It's marvelous, and it speaks to what you're doing. And I think of it as bookends. And what you said was perfect because there was no judgment. If I don't get any more yoga in, this is enough. And
Yeah.
that's just perfect. Okay, Giselle or Myra, is there anything you'd like to add?
Sure. There are a couple of things I like to offer in a class. And the first one I like to do, sometimes I do at the very beginning and toward the end. So imagine you're lying on your mat or on the rug and you're spread eagled out, similar to a star pose. Take a big intake of air and just keep going until you feel that you can't intake anymore. Raising your limbs as high as you can and then holding it until you can't anymore, and then just drop more, and then just with a big whoosh, releasing everything down. And the other thing I like to do, similar to a body scan, is just engaging every muscle. For example, crunching your toes or your hands or your thigh, your belly, as tightly as you can, and then releasing it. But really slowly, just to kind of, if you're tense, it always feels involuntary, but here you're voluntarily contracting and releasing, just kind of getting your body to feel like it's not, a tight feeling doesn't necessarily mean it's anything negative. We can create tightness as a way to release things ourselves.
That's great. Intentionally creating the tension.
Exactly.
That's
And
wonderful.
then when you release it, it feels that much more open.
Those are wonderful suggestions. Thank you so much. That's great. I want to do it now. I'm ready. Okay. Thank you, Giselle. Myra, was there anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I coach. I coach groups, and one of the things that I always do, because I'm a health coach, I'm a Reiki master, and I coach groups for a group called Sharp Again Naturally. And one of the things that I always begin my groups with is a breath exercise. And the one that people like the most, because most of these people are not there, meditation and yoga is like sort of a foreign language to them, but boxed breathing is something that is very simple and that everybody can get on board with. And so that's how that's one of the major techniques that I teach at the opening of my groups. I teach that. I teach alternate side nostril breathing and the 4-7-8 breath. And those are the standard ones that I use because they're accessible to people, and especially the box breathing. People can take that into their lives and use it, and they do. So,
Thank you. And that's the key. What do people take into their lives and use? So it's perfect. Thank you so much. Lana,
Sure.
quickly, because
Yeah,
I've got to.
I think that those are great, and I use those as well. And I find that people who have a hard time, a challenge meditating, if you can give them those 3 breaths first, it helps them focus, and it helps them not wander, because they're counting, and they're doing the box and they're counting the amounts of breaths, and the same with the 4-7-8. And it just is like a primer in a way for people to get the not as much mind wandering as they would if they didn't have those breaths.
Also, I heard this really great quote that's a yoga teacher, a meditation teacher said, which is, if someone is not accustomed to meditating and they're very stressed out, to tell them to sit still and not think about anything, they're not going to relate to that at all. But everybody has to breathe.
Yeah.
So if you start with the breath exercises, then you've got your opening.
Yeah.
So that-
Thank you. Thank you. And today I just ran across this quote today. I'll share it with you. It's Rainier Maria Rilke. Quiet friend who has come so far, feel how your breathing makes more space around you. Which I think is just such a beautiful thing. So this is beautiful. Thank you, each of you, for your practices, your best practices. That's really where I want today to go. I'm going to continue with two other pieces, but I'm going to go quickly because I'm interested in more of what you have to say, based on both what you're feeling and what you're thinking. I promised a brief review of research. The one, and I think this was in the handout that I gave to Chelsea, but I will update it and make sure everybody has it. Many years ago, I met Chris Streeter, who's a researcher in Boston, and she wrote about the effects of yoga versus walking on mood, anxiety, and the brain. And what she did was measure levels of GABA. And GABA is an abbreviation for aminobutyric acid. It reduces anxiety and depression. And it was a landmark study at the time. It was it had a very small group of people. There was an N of 19. But because there was so little research being done at the time, I think it was published first in 2010. It got an enormous circulation. But it's fascinating speaking to why yoga as compared to the other modalities. There's also a very fascinating abstract that I just want to go through very quickly on neuroinflammation and depression. I'm interested in, we all have situational, conditional depressions. Someone will say, "Why are you sad?" Or you'll say to yourself, "I don't know why. I know why I'm sad. I'm sitting in the dark because something just happened. I can identify it. I can put my finger on it. I know that it's temporary, or maybe it isn't, but I have to sit with this specific thing." I'm very interested in neuroinflammation because you can not have a major transition or change in your life, but biochemically, you're going through something very different. So these neuroinflammatory conditions, and there are many of them, are frequently triggered by chronic stress and its impact on vascular function. So what I want to point out here for today's purposes is how we carry ourselves through life. Yoga practice and asana, we could practice poses. The first one that we did together, we were expanded, we opened, we lifted our hearts, we held our heads up high, and we breathed deeply. That's how we carry ourselves through life, or it isn't. We have all gone through periods of time where we have sort of gone through life small and COVID made many people's lives, internal and external lives, small. So these big practices that really help most in terms of balancing our endocrine systems, balancing the hormones. This is what really interests me because there's a subtext to what I'm doing and a subtext to what I'm feeling. And it has to do with what I'm eating and how I'm processing what I know. And my relationship with fear and my relationship with control. And all of these things have an impact on how I carry my stressors. You might be very capable at managing all of the big things in life. I mean, maybe you're the person who should be doing the air traffic control or answering the 911 phone. Maybe you're really good in a disaster, really great in an emergency. Call me. I can do it, and I can. What's going on below the surface is something totally different. So I'm extremely interested in how we can use the research to reinforce how much control we really have with our endocrine system, balancing our metabolism. And so much of that comes from yogic practices. It comes from how we think and how we feel. I want to walk through one intellectual exercise that has had more impact on my life, and I think the intellectual lives and relationships of people with whom I work than any other. Not everyone loves this. It's thought of as a meditation, which is a problem. I think because it is so cerebral and so contemplative, but it is the acronym RAIN that comes to us from the insight meditation, Vipassana meditation. So I see some heads nodding. You're familiar with RAIN, the acronym RAIN. I'm going to go through it with you because it is so poignant as we cultivate something called compassionate detachment. One reason I wanted to teach this program and be involved in it was because without objectivity and compassionate detachment, we've learned nothing from yogic philosophy. That's a huge statement. I'll take that back. We learn a great deal. Perhaps most fundamental in my way of thinking is my personal capacity to have my experiences, observe you having your own, with an objectivity that helps me make informed decisions. RAIN is an acronym. R is recognize. I recognize what's going on in any given moment. I recognized that this was going to be a very small group. I had no idea how many people were going to come, but I was trained that if it was just 3 of us, it was going to be great. So I have that objective awareness. So RAIN is I recognize what is happening in this moment. A is I can accept it. I can acknowledge that, yes, in fact, this is what's happening. I inquire. What are the types of inquiry? I wonder how this is going to feel to the participants in such a small group. Or I wonder how I can modify my program so that everyone really has a chance to engage and be heard and be seen. So that might be my inquiry. And the N is to nurture myself by not identifying with what's going on. So let's imagine another scenario. Let's imagine that I have just received a certain kind of diagnosis. Let's imagine that over the course of a lifetime. I think my first diagnosis I was aware of was tonsillitis. Again, of course, I can recognize I had it. I could accept I had it. I could inquire, why again? But I was in pain, so I totally identified. But let's imagine I have a diagnosis that I really need to learn something about. So I have to recognize what I've just heard. If I've practiced it, when I hear it, it's like, oh, I just heard you say that. I recognize that. Okay. Can I accept it and acknowledge it? Very important for me to be able to find a way to accept and acknowledge. Inquire. What is this going to be about? One question might be, what will I discover? So the diagnosis comes down for you, for someone you love, for someone you care for someone in one of your groups, someone in one of your classes, a friend. What's the discovery possible in a diagnosis. So when we grow accustomed to inquiring, our minds aren't small. It's not like, oh, that. I'm accepting it, but I'm not breathing. I've got a lot of questions here. And I get to this very small, contracted place very quickly. But if I'm accustomed to recognizing, accepting, and inquiring, then my inquiry is open-ended. How many times have you been with a doctor who's told you a story about you or someone where you're with, and then they say, so do you have any more questions? And your mind is blank. You know, my focus, my concentration, I can't think of a question. But when we become accustomed, oh, interesting. I want to hear about that, Giselle. She's writing Byron, Katie, and inquiry. I would like to hear what you have to say about that. Inquiry is huge when we're used to thinking about things in an expansive way, in a soft, curious vessel. It's a very important thing. And then I can learn to receive information and accept it and learn a way of inquiry that allows me to nurture myself, get my questions answered in a way over time where I don't identify myself in a particular way with that which is happening. That is rain. And we could spend the rest of the night talking about other things that rain, the acronym could be reject, be alienated, ignore it, not deal with it. That's all rain too. But the idea is to open to the experience of knowing more in ways that are uplifting and life affirming. So that is an exercise where I might say to you, well, what do you think about that? But really what I'm interested in after doing the exercise of rain is how I feel when I learn that I don't have to identify with things in such a way that creates self-limiting thinking. So that is the impact of remaining small in different situations. So if you're getting the impression that a big part of today's conversation is that emotional self-regulatory action requires not just an open and expansive mind, open and expansive movements, inversions, backbends, those kinds of things. It is moving from thinking to feeling and back again seamlessly in a particular way. That's balanced awareness. That's carrying ourselves through an experience in a particular way, in relationship with what's going on. And there's a lot of room for conversation here. So let's see. Giselle, did you write the comment about Byron Katie? Would you like to explain that, please?
Sure. I mean, similar to Rain, Byron Katie's major, well, I think one of the major things she's known for is her inquiry method of trying to change your mindset from always thinking the negative in every situation. And some of the questions she encourages you to ask in the sort of script that you run through, either writing or in your mind, is what exactly is this thought that is now permeating my mind and my conscious? What am I ruminating about? Is it true or isn't it true? And if it's not true, where would I be in the situation? How do I know it's true or not true? And just a whole line saying basically what you're saying, expanding your thought process to realize most of the time when we're just forecasting something that is in the future. So keeping yourself in the moment, in the present, because in the present is not what you think is going to happen. So here in the present, you have control of where you're going to take your mind, basically.
Thank you. you are talking about the realm of imagination.
Exactly so, which is the best thing in humanity and the worst thing in humanity.
Thank you. And so this is just such a beautiful thing. The acronym RAIN, by the time you get to inquiry, maybe from now on, I'm so glad you brought this up, maybe it'll be inquiry and then talk about it again in terms of imagination, because imagination can go to such brilliant, expansive places. More often than not, it can also take you to a very dark, isolating place. And so having a practice, having a conversation, being able to talk about it, to teach it, to coach, to be able to listen to someone else having their experience without interjecting your experience, but really being able to say to them, is that true? Might that turn out differently? How might you look at this a different way? There are all kinds of ways to be in relationship, even with that part, even if it's talking to yourself, talking to your more sad, more sorrowful self. I'm sitting with an active mind trying to move myself away from a place I'd rather not be in. And we do that through these practices. So thank you so much for talking about imagination as a function of inquiry. What is true and what is not? So potent. Thank you. Did anyone else want to make a comment either about RAIN or about another contemplative exercise that has given you insights that makes it easier for you to sit with your own sadness? So we're not talking about dispelling the darkness. I see you, Amy. We're talking about being able to be in the dark and be our own light. Amy, go ahead. Thank you.
Picking up on that conversation and what Giselle was said about the Byron Katie inquiry. As many of you know, I work in a clinical setting as one of the places where I'm a yoga therapist, and one of the clinical psychologists and I have this, when we're working together with co-treating client, she picked up on one of my phrases, which was the stories we tell ourselves. And so it gets into that sense of imagination and being able to be in relationship with ourselves in a healthy way. And so the rumination, the stories we tell ourselves, is it true or not true? So that was something that really stuck with her. I mean, with me as well, because I think for many people, and the more elaborate some of them get with the stories they tell themselves, it becomes even more potent. Oh, that is a story and it's gotten pretty elaborate. Is it true or not true? And so it's a way to kind of stop and pause and reflect when people begin to realize that if someone gives pushback about yogic phrases like mantras, I'm like, well, what stories do you tell yourself already? Is that not a mantra? But is it a healthy one, right? If people get a little bit stuck in the rumination phase. Yeah.
There's a very interesting book called Addicted to Drama. Not trauma. Addicted to Drama. And I started listening to a webinar and reading the book, and I'm thinking about all of the people I think about. Like, God, they're so connected to their story. I was reading about myself.
Yeah.
My story is like, oh, this is about me. This is about me. And I keep the book out. I see it all the time, and I'm not telling the same stories. And sometimes it's not the story that we're telling ourselves. It's not our own voices in our heads. It's the voices of other people that we have allowed to remain a part of our story. So all of this inquiry, whose story is this? Whose voice is this? Whose reaction is this? So thanks.
Well, with Linda, this circles back. I'm looking at my notes here from the very start of your talk. Was pillar one, the diet and supplementation, our emotional diet and the nutritional value of what information we choose to ingest becomes part of a story. on repeat. Yeah. So like, can we cleanse that dietary void of nutrition component perhaps out?
Thank you. Thank you. How many stories has someone told you about and you said, well, I'm not swallowing that. You know, I don't believe it. I don't want it. I don't like it. But the metaphor of thank you. Yeah, that's the story. And so the end of what I wanted to do today, but this is so much better. We're not going to practice back bends. But what I want you to know is that forward bends and inversions and back bends, whether it's this back bend, I'm so glad to see you, and I throw my upper body into a little bit of extension, or I was gonna demonstrate some things on the ball. I was going to demonstrate a handful of other back bends, thinking that there, might be people here who don't practice yoga and have no idea of the variety of forward bends and back bends. But anytime your head is below your heart, every time your head is below your heart, there's a physiological shift, as long as you feel safe in doing what you're doing. And so when I personally, or I'm working with someone who is in a darker place or very anxious, we'll do more, we call them heart openers, or very subtle restorative back bends, so that sort of like it was when we started. So I'll just demonstrate one variation of a back bend, and you can do it when we all sign off. But let's just imagine the same support that I had under my legs at the very beginning. Let's imagine that I bring myself into a little supported back bend. So this might be as subtle as someone might want it who has a tender back, or you could make it even bigger. If you were to stretch one leg out, only one, never both, then you get an openness of the psoas muscles, which are major hip flexors, and as that psoas softens and relaxes, its relationship with the vagus nerve, which goes down both sides of your body, creates a calmer, quieter experience inside the vessel. So you would stretch out, you would go on one side and then extend the other leg. There are lots of cues that I would give you to protect your back. You could draw your knees in towards your chest. You could stretch your legs up above. So the idea is to find ways to practice that are delightful and inverted. I was also going to throw myself into a handstand at the wall, but I'll hold off and do that another time. Or if you want to watch, we'll make plans to do another time. I'm interested in any other comments or observations. This was supposed to be an introduction to ways that we all appreciate the practices that allow us to take better care of ourselves, that we can teach to other people. It's the doing it, it's the kriya, it's the action, it's the jnana, it's the knowledge, it's the knowing what to do, and it's the icha, it's the desire and the will to know and do. And that's how things work through the yogic lens. We notice, we respond, and we act. What else would you like to add, anyone, in the next few minutes? So there are a handful of us. So if you want to speak, you have 33 seconds. In order for everyone. No, really, you could take a minute. What's in your heart? What's on your mind that you think or feel? Do you feel different now than you felt when we began? I think for a lot of us, we are, especially if you're a yoga therapist, this is familiar territory for you. What you've heard from me today is a confirmation of things you've already known. Hearing from one another is priceless. And if this interests you as a small group, I am happy to do more of this through ARPF if you all want to continue to have dialogue on emotional self-regulation. Dialogue, more from you, less from me. I'm very interested in knowing, because I'd like to put together a list of successful practices that can be readily available on the website. All right, one thing I'll tell you. One of the master glands, or perhaps the master gland, is the pineal gland. I want to tell you how to find it. First, I'm going to take you to the pituitary. You're going to sit tall. You're going to imagine that you're gazing, your eyes closed or open. Imagine the space where both eyes would turn to if they were to look towards the center of your skull, behind the bridge of your nose. That's where the pituitary gland is. So soften your awareness there. Take your tongue and place it on the roof of your mouth where the soft palate meets the hard palate. Feeling a lot like the third eye. Sense that space, and from the pituitary gland you would make a back dive about 2.5 inches to the pituitary. Deep within the brain, close to the brain stem. Master control your hormonal system. The next time you meditate and you turn your awareness towards the third eye, know what's there. An expansive, elaborate network that relies upon calmness, clarity, self-compassion. And dare I say, more than a little bit of compassionate objectivity and detachment. With your eyes closed, take this moment to acknowledge the presence of one another and the precious nature of all that we share and hold dear. Thank you so much for your dedication and your appreciation for this organization and all that it stands for. Namaste. So, thank you for being here. And do let Chelsea know. Oh, I feel lighter. That's so nice. That's wonderful. Okay. If you'd like to do this again as a small group, just let us know. I'm here. Take care, everyone.